and then we'll have a conversation together in the next 59 minutes. So, Lord, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for this afternoon. We thank you for this day. For everyone who is part of this webinar, that we are able to come together with technology to discuss a vision for Christian higher education. We pray for just a great discussion, for insightful exchanges, and ultimately we want to help advance your kingdom through the work that we do. So would you be with all of us? And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So Matthew, if you don't mind clicking the record button for me, that would be great.
It's done.
Oh, perfect. All right, let's do a quick round of introductions. So my name is Mike Truong. I'm from Azusa Pacific University, and I oversee the Office of Innovative Teaching and Technology, which is online fact development and educational technology.
What order do we want to go in here, guys? I'll start, I guess, up here. I'm chair of the undergrad business program at Biola University, writing a lot of curriculum this summer. So this is all real interesting to me as Biola is trying to be more innovative in some of our new programs. I've also done a lot of work with Saylor and the Saylor Foundation, writing a textbook and developing a couple of courses.
Great.
All right, I'll go next. I'm Andrew Sears. I'm the president of City Vision University, and I'm going to be presenting later. So,
I'm Dan Bricker. I'm at Azusa Pacific University, and my role is faculty training, and I work in the same office with Mike Truong.
Great. This is Jay Gary, Oral Roberts University in Tulsa. Friends with Matthew Henry and Andrew Sears and Mike Truong. I do a lot of what you guys do: faculty support training for adjuncts, curriculum development for new degrees, launch new degrees for ORU. And I have a number of my colleagues here, 3 or 4 at least, on the line with me here. They'll introduce themselves. Andrew.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Sure can.
Cool. Hey, my name is Andrew Shawfoot. I'm the lead curriculum media specialist here. So I solve the media problems for the online campus and all that kind of stuff. We have fun.
Hello, I wonder if you can hear me?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, my name is Olgi Gary. I am Jay's second half. And I am the lead instructional designer here at ORU.
Wonderful.
Sasha?
Hello.
Yes.
I'm Sasha Turtova, and I'm an instructional designer, and I work with Olgi and Janet, Judy, Andrew, and Kaylin, who is our new member. So it's great to be in this webinar, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the good things.
Welcome.
Who else from Oral Roberts?
Hi, I'm Judy, and I'm from ORU as well, attending with the instructional design team.
Hi, Judy.
Hello.
Is that all for ORU?
Should be, Mike. Go.
Okay, all right. So let's move on to somebody else.
I'm Carrie Morrison, and I have the pleasure of working with Mike Truong every day at Azusa Pacific University, and Dan Bricker as well.
Maybe we'll go through the APU folks here.
Hi, I'm Jim Nasapak. I am Director of University Services at Azusa Pacific University, and I think I might be the only person that's not on the academy side on this call.
Yeah.
I think is that it? I think that might be it for the APU side. Anybody else?
Looks like we have a Judy.
Yeah.
Well, I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Matthew Henry, and Jim, I'm on both sides too. I think on the academic side and the administrative side, but I'm primarily the Chief Information Officer here at LeTourneau University in Texas, and I also lead our Innovation Lab and also our Future Commission as well. So I'm very interested in these thoughts and ideas from you all and learning from you all together.
All right, did we get everybody?
All right.
All right. So let me do some really quick housekeeping. So just to prevent interference, so when you're not speaking, just put your mute button on so that it will just turn off your mic. And that way there wouldn't be any kind of issues, especially when you're typing or when there's some sort of background noise. I encourage you to use the chat window when you have a question or comments. If you want to share a resource, that's really a great place to put that information is in the chat. And Matthew and I will do our best to monitor the chat, and then there will be some periods of time where we can sort of focus on sort of questions from the chat and sort of direct our attention there. The session is being recorded, and we will be sending a link out to those who've registered. There were a lot more people who registered who are not able to be part of this call, so we told them we will send them a recording. And also, I believe more than half of you wanted a transcript of this session as well, but we'll see whether or not doing the recording of our discussion or conversation would be helpful or not. And then finally, our time together is we're really going to do a really quick recap of the video that hopefully you have had a chance to watch. But Andrew will give us a little recap, and then from there we have a set of questions that will guide our conversation today. So that's sort of our format. Just a brief overview of our group. This is the Christian Higher Education Innovation Alliance is something that Andrew, Matthew, and I started as a listserv. Basically, it was the three of us in January or sometime back then, and it wasn't really meant to be what it is today, but it actually has it has evolved, and it has actually become better than what we have imagined. And so I think we're glad to have this, our first sort of webinar that we're sponsoring. We'll provide more information about this. I'll put the link on how to join this group on the chat as well. But right now we have about 50 folks from about 24 CCC, as well as just NGOs who are involved in Christian education. So really excited, and Matthew and I will co-host this, and we'll do our best to start addressing any technical issues. If there are any, just put those in the chat. So for now, I will hand this over to Andrew, and you can maybe do a little introduction about what interests you in doing this, and then maybe a recap of the video. Oh, Andrew, you're muted. Sorry.
Unmute. Okay, can you hear me now? I guess so. Everyone's muted, so I'm assuming that you can hear me. So I will go ahead and also share my screen. So, City Vision has been working, trying to find ways to use some of these new innovations really to help developing countries. And I've done quite a bit of work in this space. So I'm going to share, I assume most of you have already seen my talk, but I'm going to give a quick overview and try to address some of the questions that already came up. So let me do a shared screen in just 1 second. I can find, here we go. All right, shared screen. And here we go, shared screen. You should be able to see my PowerPoint. Okay, can you all see my PowerPoint right now, I assume? Yes, so.
Yes.
All right, great. Basically, just to frame things, there's three main trends that I covered. There's dramatic growth in higher education happening more in this 25-year period than there was in the previous 900 years. There's also dramatic growth happening in Christianity, where the center of Christianity is changing from the West to the global South. And then the third trend that's happening is this trend towards consolidation. And I use the analogy of the way media was consolidated, where it used to be that 90% of the media, I think it took like 40 organizations or 40 or 50 companies to make up 90% of the media, and now it only takes 6. And the same type of consolidation is happening in higher education. So, you know, business strategists talk about a lot of the future of the world in terms of the idea of platform competition. And basically the central idea in platform competition is that the future of the success of Christian higher education, I believe, is going to be determined more by the competitiveness of the overall Christian higher education ecosystem and platform rather than the competitiveness of individual institutions. So, you know, the way to think of platforms, most often they're talked about in terms of Google versus Microsoft versus Apple versus Amazon. And the idea is once you enter Apple's ecosystem, they really try to keep you in there. You know, I have an iPhone and that makes me want to have a Mac, and it makes me want to have an Apple TV. And increasingly, that's the way the world's moving towards. I would argue that, you know, there's other platforms, the state-owned, and increasingly they're becoming mega universities. So, you know, if Hillary's plan goes through, you know, the U.S. would fairly quickly be, you know, in this space. But Arizona State, I think, you know, they're hoping to have 1 million students. That's a part of their university, and there's already 21 mega universities globally that have 1 million students. So increasingly, there's competition that's going to happen there, and I think that there's these two groups where Christian higher education is increasingly going to be competing with, and it's not going to be Liberty, or it's not going to be Grand Canyon, or it's not going to be your school by itself. It's going to be the whole ecosystem that's going to be competing. So. And there's 3 possible futures. There's a tech dominant future. There's, you know, one of the predictions was that 4 or 5 companies will provide over half degrees in 20 or 30 years. That's kind of, in my view, probably a dystopian future, but it's one that is possible. Another one is the one that right now, you know, Hillary Clinton is proposing, which would provide, you know, free tuition either for the first 2 years or possibly, you know, for the full program, where all of a sudden you're going to see dramatic decline in Christian higher education in either of those other scenarios. And the third one, and the one that I'm advocating for really, is where you could have dramatic growth in Christian higher education. And a lot of what I argue for is, you know, looking at different ways of unbundling education and things along those lines. So if I had to say, you know, what do I see as the purpose of the Christian Higher Education Innovation Alliance? It's really to enable that third preferred future. So how do we promote diffusion of innovation to improve the competitiveness of the overall Christian higher education ecosystem? So I sent an email to the CHEIA group list with a mind map, and really what I try to do is I try to categorize innovations into 2 categories, you know, using Clayton Christensen's framework. Is that there's sustaining innovations, and those really usually have a shorter term timeline, and they're not radical departures. It's, you know, how do you do something 5 or 10% better? And then there's disruptive innovations, which is you know, more of a radical shift, and often those might have a 5 to 50 year timeline. And what I would argue is, for this group, we should, you know, think about potential work areas. And what I'm proposing for this webinar is basically I'm trying to lay out the vision for one of the work areas for this group. So, and that would be for low end disruption. And, you know, I would be up for, you know, taking point on leading some of that. And I've, you know, shopped a smaller, you know, proposal that fleshes out some of the details more to a few of you. And I'll talk about that in the next slide, but calling it the Global Christian College Credit Consortium, which could kind of be a global Christian counterpart to ACE Credit, for those of you familiar with ACE Credit, kind of course level accreditation. But I believe that there's also opportunities for high-end disruption. And really, I think that the model to replicate there is the University Innovation Alliance. And that's a group of 12 big state schools that I would say what they're doing is actually disruptive, because they have moved the needle in a way on increasing access, especially to disadvantaged groups, in a way that hasn't happened really in the history of higher education. There's been schools that have increased access by 5%, 10%, but they're in some states, they're doubling the number of lower income, sometimes 3 or 4 times the number of lower income. But in doing that, they're not only improving the outcomes of the disadvantaged students, but they're improving the outcomes of all students. And, part of what I would argue also is the real opportunity. There's a lot of things that people are saying is disruptive, but the real opportunity, I think the center is around the idea of automation. Every industry in the world is being increasingly automated, and you can call it software eating the world, you can call it whatever. Some of the predictions are that 49% of all jobs will be automated in the next 20 years. And higher education isn't immune. So there's a question of how do we, and automation, I don't like that word, I like the word human-machine collaboration, and bringing increased productivity. What if you could not just increase retention by 10%, but increase it by 50%? That's a radical shift. And I think that there's also some process or business model innovations that often are paired with the technology innovations, like dual enrollment, early college, or what MOOCs really right now, the only viable business model that I see for most MOOCs is offering free courses as a marketing investment, at least how it relates to schools. So that's what I'd argue is the purpose, what I would advocate for the purpose of this group. But the last thing I want to do is talk about this Global Christian College Credit Consortium. What we're trying to do is to pull together a Christian alternative, global alternative to ACE credit that's going to basically have a much lower bar, course level accreditation. We're talking with a number of groups that in some of these cases, an entire year of tuition could be $100 plus partner tuition. Some of the groups I'm talking with, we might get the whole year down to $300 for the freshman, sophomore year. And part of what's happening is the freshman through junior year, at least in developing countries, is becoming commoditized. And then the final year we'd be offering through City Vision University for $3,500. Now, I know that not every school is going to take this framework, but part of it is understanding, okay, this is what might be a growing framework in developing countries, and how could we partner with your schools to provide more advanced education. The last part I want to add is just to try to frame all this in terms of disruptive innovation theory. This is the curve that's most often used in terms of disruptive innovation theory. You start off, it's this black and white, or this black curve, the unbundled. Usually you start off with a technology that's not very good, and over time it dramatically improves. And the idea is that, as this unbundled architecture, moves through and it improves its quality, then what you can start to do is you can start to, supersede the quality performance of some of these other things. So what I would argue is that, the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy are going to get commoditized first. So it's going to be, Christian high school first, then it's going to be freshman through junior year. What I've done is basically proposed an architecture that would largely commoditize freshman through junior high school, create kind of almost an app store ecosystem where you could kind of have interchangeable Lego blocks. But in the long run, and this is, I think for the more resource schools that have traditionally had an interdependent architecture, I think that the bigger opportunity is going to be around this analytics and working with adaptive learning vendors. And part of the reason why I'm saying that that's on the unbundled curve is because I think in many cases, the most effective adaptive learning courses are going to be the ones that are going to come from third-party vendors. If you try to build it all yourself, I think that you're going to lose some of the advantage. But, in the end, this is the overall, picture. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and go back to Michael and I'm going to unmute people. Michael, you have some the list of questions I think that you could share on the screen.
I'm going to pull that back up here.
So, you know, there's general questions, and I'll just talk through them, and people can cover any of them. So, you know, one is what stood out from the video and the vision, what's missing, what do you buy in the vision, how it can be improved, and then why don't you go to slide 2, Michael, Michael, do you want to talk through these, or are you okay with me just going through?
You're welcome to. Just some directions here. So there is a raise your hand button on your interface. If you hover over depending on your device, there's usually a more, like if you click on your screen, there should be a more where you can raise your hand, or you can just add, you know, say, let me talk on the chat, and then we will give you the mic. So just, that's a technical instruction. But go ahead, Andrew.
And Mike, real quickly, we had a question that came in from Ogi on the chat. She had asked, what do you mean by having a much lower bar? You mean lower as in meeting accreditation standards?
Well, so part of what I went into and I don't know if you watched the full video, but there's a system of vocational frameworks. And, you know, one of the, you know, slides that I used was saying that what we do is we take Western standards and we impose them on the rest of the world. And that might make sense in the West, but in the rest of the world, the vocational system of the vocational frameworks makes a lot more sense. So the European Union, about 50 countries in the Commonwealth, you know, the majority of the world has a system of vocational frameworks. And these frameworks, to get into the nuts and bolts of what's different about them, is one, the biggest difference in the part that well, there's multiple things. One is it's unbundled. So instead of only, you know, providing credentials at the associate's and bachelor's level, they provide credentials that are semi-portable at the end of each year. So you get a certificate, you get a diploma that within these systems are, you know, about as portable as, say, an associate's degree would be. So that's one advantage. But the other advantage is that within most vocational frameworks, faculty doing the grading and don't have to have a degree above what they're teaching. They have to have the same degree as what they're teaching. So what that does is that reduces your cost overhead, and you know, it's an architectural difference. I mean, the unbundling, the allowing Legos, what it does is, you know, there's probably, you know, my guess is 20 to 50 million students going through vocational frameworks. And in most of the world, they're going through programs that will cost $500 or less a year. And so, you know, is the bar lower? Well, it's a different type of bar. In some ways, it might actually be higher. You know, it's more of a competency-based framework. So I think the way they define competencies in some cases are going to be higher. But in other cases, you know, the input-based, you know, to put it in disruptive innovation terms, the input-based requirements for accreditation will be lower. Like they don't really care as much about, you know, the faculty have advanced degrees. What they care about is that the competencies are being met, those type of things. So does that answer your question, Olgi?
Yes.
Okay. All right. There's, I think 3 categories. Michael, do you want to walk people through the other 2 pages of questions, or how do you want to do it? Do you want to do one at a time?
Well, I was going to try to do it just one at a time so we don't maybe mix up the conversations too much. I don't know. Are you okay with that, or you want to?
Yeah, I think it might be good to do, I think because it's so awkward for each person to speak.
Okay.
Often I find these type of things can be good to do a little bit more of round robin.
Okay.
And maybe what we could do is, so the second part is, you know, I think the general idea is saying, can we have a framework that supports, you know, the general idea is, you know, could we support, there's tens of thousands of Bible institutes out there that could be semi-accredited. Can we get them to fit these vocational frameworks and provide a lower cost path. And I think that the bigger question is, if we're trying to achieve this change, whether it's the particular vision I'm saying at low end disruption, or maybe the larger vision for the Christian Higher Education Innovation Alliance, who should we be talking with? How do we achieve this preferred future? So I don't know who wants to kind of jump in answering those questions.
Hey, Andrew, we've got a question from Jay as well. Jay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew, my question is, what potential do you think it is for regionally accredited Christian higher education institutions to adopt an alternative vocational framework? I can see how a DEC school could do it, but how could we prototype something like this so that regionally accredited law schools, higher learning could do this type of low-end disruption collectively? Right. Because we have a lot of, our university has a global vision, right?
Right.
The president wants to drive it. The issue is how do we get into the ACWAL system, or how would we relate to our own accreditors? Is that through members of understanding? What is that?
Yeah, well,
the ACWAL system, level 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding that vocational frameworks are considered accredited. So in terms of, and I assume most regional, accreditation bodies and accepting international credit, a big thing is it going to be accredited? And then they leave a lot of it up to the institution. Part of what I was talking with Matthew about is, what you have to do is you have to create a skunk works, and you have to have a part of your university that is going to have a different cost structure. So APU has done that somewhat with University College, but to a certain extent, in some cases, what you might need is a skunk works within the skunk works, So you do a trial, you try to find ways to avoid your existing high cost structure, and you also look at the question of what's your marginal cost, because in internet economics that I studied, kind of at MIT, the key thing in internet economics is what's your marginal cost? What's your cost to add one more student? And if you can find a way to provide some sort of service where your marginal cost to that group of students, adding 30 more students, I mean, you guys know your average cost per student, right? But what would be your marginal cost to bring in a group of Kenyans for a summer and have an adjunct teach them? Your dorms are empty. You got to pay your adjunct. You got to have the supervision of the adjunct. You got to provide, whatever facilities to the Kenyans. But if you had 50 Kenyans that came in and, for a summer, is it going to have to follow the same cost structure as your traditional university? Could you create a skunk works to do that? That's part of what I would argue, but I don't know if that even makes sense to people. I mean, I started talking with Matthew at LeTourneau about that option, but I think, part of it is what I think the key, it's recognizing, it's the phrase from the book, the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. And there is a fortune, 90 or almost 90% of the growth is going to be happening in developing countries of higher education. And in many cases, you got to have a different price tier. So can you compete in that price tier? Can you have a competitive product in that price tier? And what would that competitive product be? So that's one way of looking at this. Does that get to your question?
Yeah, very helpful. And we've had conversations, with the President's Council about alternative one campus vision, alternative live virtual students, telepresence. We do have unused dorm capacity, but it's other audience that's virtual. But I'm very interested in the alternative, non-traditional. For example, quote the YWAM students, right? The Bible students, the Bible Institute. We have a Bible Institute. But that whole chain, that whole value chain, value pathway, helping to bring some structure to that so we can bring in sophomores, juniors, whatever, into the ORU experience. Good, appreciate it. I'll turn it over to others. Thanks.
Jay, that's a good thought, though. So you do have a Bible Institute. Is that come under your WACS accredited?
Well, our Bible Institute is non-formal education at ORU. It's not formal, so it doesn't come under the our regional accreditation. But we do a 2-for-1 for that, right? We accept it into some selected degrees. So we do have some protocols non-formally. The question is, how do we scale that up? And how do we, I mean, for a CHEIA group like this, how can we relate to the YWAM world, right? Which has its own university that's not regionally accredited and no pathways for bachelor degrees for its people, right? So those are the kind of larger issues I'd like to work on. And then, how we attack it as universities, we can customize as we go along in the ALCOL framework, right? But
yeah.
I think the GC4, right? I think it's brilliant. The question is, how do we operationalize it? And
yeah.
Do we need to take it to McClellan or someone else to get startup funding, or just not just ask permission, just start the revolution, right? And see what we can do, like you've been doing, Andrew.
Yeah, let me share a slide real quick that I think would be helpful. And I probably, should have put this in originally. Many of you have seen the presentation by Arizona State University's president, and this is the main diagram he used. And let me just talk you through it. At their core, they have, research, which a lot of Christian universities aren't going to have, $5 billion research operations like Arizona State. But then they have what they call their full immersion on campus, and then their digital immersion online. Can you guys, I assume, can see this? And then they have what they're calling their digital immersion massively open, so they're MOOCs. And then they're having something that's even bigger than their MOOCs that might be mass media based, so instead of having 100,000 students, they're going to be trying to get, how do we get 5 million? I think the point of what I'm saying is ASU has, I don't know what their budget is, but I'm pretty sure it's in the billion. They can compete at all 5 of these levels. Christian universities can't. So this MOOC level is what I'm calling this non-traditional stuff. There's a lot more here. There's the Bible Institutes. And part of what I'm getting at is saying that starts to get a lot more interesting, and, having very streamlined paths, for that starts to get a lot more interesting whenever you think about how are you going to compete against ASU, because ASU, if you join their MOOC, it's an ecosystem. Their MOOC is really pushing you towards joining their online. And that's really, would push you to go to their grad school in person. So, as Christians, the point is to have that whole end-to-end ecosystem. So does that, and I think the other thing I would just add, Matthew talked about doing a working group to have early high school. I think that's a part of this. And I think potentially Christians providing open education. I know, Dave, you said that you're contributing to Sailor. I don't know if you guys, and I know Biola's had some open Biola stuff. The more Christians contribute to open education, the more the whole ecosystem is going to be healthy. So I think all those are part of the strategy. So.
That's exciting, isn't it? I had a thought related to the building out that ecosystem. So what it sounds like is really what the Christian education direction is looking for is a platform to centralize all of these independent groups. And like you were saying in your talk, there's already like tons of free information out there, particularly if you look at churches providing that information like all the time. A lot of times it's free. So having a platform set up that aggregates all of this already existing content into a format with machine learning so that each category has appropriate tags. And then by aligning those tags in such a way that you're constantly creating those Lego building blocks so that you are having content for programs that don't even exist just because nobody's thought to look in those gaps. And then the content that does exist, you can see like all the information is in this cluster just because that's where all the information is. So does that kind of speak to the direction that you're looking to go into?
Well, I'd say to a certain extent, yes, but I don't think that for Christians, Arizona State's model, they can do it all themselves. Christians, it's going to have to be, how do we work with many diverse partners? Because I don't think that any Christian group is going to become the Christian MOOC. Now, it could be that CCCU decides to invest $1 million to create a Christian edX. And I don't know whether that's a good idea or not. I'm 50-50 on, things like that. I think that's not as important as Christians are feeding the Christian ecosystem overall, so that, we don't end up in the MOOC space like Christians did in Hollywood. We said Hollywood's evil, let's avoid Hollywood, and then Christians aren't represented there, and we just let Hollywood go to hell.
Right.
And then we blame it for going to hell because Christians weren't there. Like, we don't want to do that in the MOOC space. We don't want to do that in the open education space. And because what's going to happen is there's going to be these pipelines. Is the vision of Hillary going to win or Arizona State going to win? Well, I think it really depends on, do we work together to have a collaborative product that, but I think it's going to require, some more collaboration than typically happens among Christians is kind of the general gist that I would argue. So part of the question is, how do we get that to happen? Because each school, it's kind of a tragedy of the commons problem, right? So each school left to its own strategy should just outcompete every other Christian school. But if we all collaborate, then we can grow the whole pie for everyone, and then we can win and get the preferred future. So, I think that's the vision. So.
Yeah, and so in cultivating that ecosystem, like you said, there isn't one Christian entity that could become that MOOC like ASU or anything like that. But having some entity in whatever capacity that is to take the lead where other independent education providers can seek to as a way to just bring their information in. So again, by aggregating, then there's not one person that says, I'm creating this stuff myself. It's saying, I value everything that that you guys are working on, and I want to make sure that it's accessible to the most, to more people than you can currently reach. So, but having that platform to reach people, it would basically be a management and marketing platform based on machine learning. Are you familiar with knowledge graphs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like based on a knowledge graph where you just go in, you identify, okay, this is where our content is. If we have content on like this section, and then this is where your objectives are, then you just follow all the nodes until you reach that destination. But all those nodes are created by independent education providers like churches and right now media and all those different groups.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Part of what I argued, and I sent links to my Christensen Institute article, that I think probably, the question is, how big should the Lego be, right?
Right.
And what I was arguing essentially is that, you got to pretty much just pick an arbitrary size. And then if you're going to pick an arbitrary size, you might as well call it a course. And, you can have micro Legos, but the basic Lego brick should probably be a course. And, you could have, micro Legos that are lessons, and then you could have, Lego kits that might be, a year or a degree. And then, the analogy I used was the university itself becomes a Lego city, right? And, so I'd love to hear from Dave, since you're at Biola, and I know you guys have been big on, there's Open Biola, and you've contributed to Sailor. I mean, how do you guys, I mean, you're probably like one of the main pioneers there in Biola in this space, but how do you guys view kind of the Christian ecosystem concept and a lot of these ideas?
Well, I just raised the idea to the provost's office the other day, not the provost herself, but I started sharing some of what's been talked about, and all I got back was, this is interesting. I don't know if it could work, but I have a lot of questions. So I wanted to get in on this call and kind of hear this discussion, and then see about bringing one or more of them into it. I would like to ask a couple of maybe foundational questions that I feel like maybe I've missed it somewhere along the discussions you guys have had, but and excuse me if this seems so basic, but when you say Christian higher education, what do we mean by that? Because the definition of that, I mean, we have all these CCCU schools, we have all these other independent organizations we're talking about, but some of us have different visions for what that means. Does it mean Bible classes? Does it mean every class has integrated your faith? Because frankly, I'm a Christian and I'm trying to decide, where am I going to go get my degree? I need to understand what the value add, or what, in other words, what is the compelling vision to send me to a Christian school, or a Christian higher education in this case? That's something we're grappling with as we look at what our state is attempting to do to us with the regulations and with what we've traditionally required our undergraduates to do. So I would just be real interested in maybe, how do we determine if someone qualifies as part of this consortium that we're wanting to put together? How Christian do they have to be? Is there any sort of guide to that? Has that been discussed, and maybe I just missed that discussion?
I mean, this group, as I see it, is a pretty, right now, informal group. So there's the question for the group, and right now it's just been who wants to join. I think we don't want vendors who are going to be selling stuff all the time, and it's basically people who can contribute innovation. Right. I think that there's Christian tertiary education is probably a better term. I use the term higher education because people understand it, right. But tertiary education is a bigger umbrella of any organized, education. It probably wouldn't include sermons, but it probably would include Bible institutes, would be my guesses, in that. But I think that the part that gets really tricky is that once you get to an unbundled world, and someone might take, we're going to be starting to put a lot of our Christian courses as MOOCs. If they do a build your own degree, and part of it is using Christian content, part of it's not. Was that Christian higher education or not, right? Right. Because it really depends in, how much we're contributed to the overall ecosystem. And I think that the idea that Christian higher education, Microsoft basically was getting punished because they thought that they could force everyone to live in their monolithic world. And then they had to realize, we need to have Microsoft everywhere. And I think that to a certain extent, that the conversion experience that Microsoft went through to, cloud first, mobile first, Microsoft everywhere, I think that type of conversion experience is probably something we could all learn from. And that, how do we get Christian higher education everywhere? Not just, within traditional institutions.
Well, and that's a great answer. I want to be sure we're thinking that through. For instance, I teach in a business school. So, yeah. I'm thinking, well, if someone took a statistics class, business statistics, at a non-Christian institution, of course we accept it for credit. But Biola wouldn't accept, there's a lot of other things we might not accept because of the way we teach the class, as we'd say, it's a Christian integrated class. And so that's where I just wonder is it better for us to create our own thing and say this is Christian, or is it better for us to take Christian content and integrate it with what others are building, or both is maybe where we end up. But that was just really one question I had that kind of made me think through as I'm writing curriculum for Biola, thinking through, is this something Biola should offer? It's silly for us to offer something that we can't do well. And so I look at what are the talents we have, what does the market want? And let me just maybe add a second part to that question. I have a lot more. I won't ask them all in this discussion, but one of the other things that I focus on this summer in curriculum writing is the adult degree completion student versus what we call the traditional student. And some of the things I'm hearing, like people attending Sailor and doing these building block things, they could be all different ages. But at least when we're developing curriculum, we're looking at them as a different market, right? We're looking at the 18-year-old just out of high school, has one set of desires, has one, they need, we look at them as people we can help with spiritual formation a lot more than maybe someone coming in at 35 who's been going to church all their lives and just wants to finish their business degree. And so how do we meet both needs? If we take this 35-year-old and make him take our Bible minor, which we make all the 18-year-olds do, then they're not going to want to come to Biola because that's going to add 2 years to their program. But if we say, well, wait, the 18-year-old, this is where you're at in your life, and the 35-year-old, just as an example, you're much more practical, and you want to come and just get your business degree. How do we do that? And so in this discussion here, it seems like sometimes we're talking more about people who've been kind of going to school here and there all their lives at international. And then sometimes it sounds like we're talking about someone coming in as a freshman at 18 years old. Are you looking at those differently, or are you really seeing there's one kind of bigger model that we can make work for everybody?
Yeah, I would definitely say that we are. And I think that's part of why I said on the CHEIA working groups, there's going to be these different tiers. There's the low end disruption, which I think might map more to the adults. And there's a high end, which is probably going to map more to the traditional.
Okay.
And, I'll give a quick answer to your question, but I want to hear from other people, because honestly, I feel like for this other part, there's going to be, some of the other people on this call could probably give a better answer than I could on, what makes it Christian. But
can I throw one last thing in, and then you can mute me? I'm teaching business analytics at Biola right now, so I'd be more than willing to help out with any of the analytic stuff you guys need.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, that's great. So part of it is there's, the example I used was you're unbundling. A degree is a monolithic thing, so you have the whole truck, right? And is education really Christian if it becomes just Lego bricks? And, I would say that the strongest strength of Christian education becomes in the worldview, not just course by course, it becomes in the worldview. So it's going to be in the Lego kit. But maybe even more than the worldview is the community. So that's the Lego City model. I think that what does it make it Christian? I think you can use the Lego analogy, and you're going to be getting different products. Like a Lego kit you can provide online. You can't really provide a very effective, university community online. I mean, you can do somewhat, but not, you lose a lot of it. So, but I think other people probably have a lot of thoughts of, where do you draw the line of what makes it Christian, and then things along those lines. So do people have thoughts on responding to the questions that Dave was throwing out? Are people muted? Let me see.
Just a quick thought. So looking at your unbundling and rebundling slide, you kind of break down into education to 4 components. You have transformative experience, access to opportunity, metacognition and skills, and then you have knowledge acquisition. It sounds like Christian education, looking at content, would only fall under knowledge acquisition in terms of ministry, whereas is a business degree Christian, you might put that into another category. It sounds like that would be more of a transformative experience, possibly under the metacognition and skills if you look at that in terms of community. But what if that's part of the equation of Christian isn't content, it's context? Yeah, this is the slide.
Yeah, that's it. So I would say that the Lego kit in the analogy is going to be the metacognition. It's where you get your Christian worldview, right? So that's one of the blocks that I'm showing in there. Lego can charge, I don't know what the markup is between Lego blocks and Lego kits, but my guess it's a factor of 10 to 100. So, you know, there's a big value add in adding the whole package, right? So that's the metacognition and skills. The transformative experience, you know, the university community, that's hard to replicate. And, you know, these days, more and more, that's what people are saying. You know, you go, the analogy everyone's using is the Super Bowl, right? That, you know, they make half their money off of TV or 90% of their money off of TV and 10% of their money off of ticket sales on the Super Bowl. And using that as the model for universities in the future, that, you know, you might make 10% of your revenue off of the in-person experience, but it's like being at the Super Bowl. It's an awesome, awesome thing, right? But if you could get, you know, the like 100 million people viewing, I mean, that's the challenge, right? Is how do you get the wider span where you can make revenue? But I think that, you know, the point is that there's a huge opportunity globally for that. So
yeah, no, I think you're right, because that's, I mean, looking in the tech industry as well, you see the same thing with companies like Evernote, where it's only like 1 or 2% of their income comes from charging on that subscription-based model. So it could be that same kind of thing here, and like you were talking about in the pre-recorded session, taking the church body as that distribution platform, and that's your open to everybody, and then you connect churches with higher education as that filtering mechanism. So you're creating a deeper level of unity amongst the church body. You know, there's going to be definitely some things to look past, such as like denomination and different like other more specific points of view. But as a generic distribution model, I mean, the church far outnumbers higher education.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think, yeah, that's one of the key opportunities out there. So, Michael, do you want to, you know, jump in, or Michael or Matthew, do you guys have thoughts? Or
Matthew, you want to go first, or?
Doesn't matter. I've got lots of thoughts. Dave and I are carrying on a conversation on chat too. So,
okay. And I'm also mindful of our time. We have about 7 minutes left, and so I want to make sure you know, we kind of touch on the last piece, which is sort of how we want to move forward with the CHEIA group. So I think I've raised some of these questions with Andrew directly via email, and I think it echoes what Jay also has mentioned in terms of just the traditional. So maybe this is a map that we can kind of focus on for a little bit. So I think my experience personally, my professional experience has been above water. You know, it's in this kind of, and really it's in the, you know, sort of this area here. And I would assume that most, you know, people maybe on this call are kind of in that shoe in terms of being part of a Christian higher education institution, a formal one where it's accredited, where, you know, the traditional kind of campus residential base, and then there might be some involved in the Christian. And the big challenge for me and just cognitively how to think about this is how do we access the rest of this below the surface? And that's where I'm still stuck. I mean, I think in my thinking, because I think I'm too into the system above in this world where it's hard for me to think beyond how would the rest of the ecosystem fit in, and how do we partner, how do we move forward without either dictating the terms of how this new ecosystem is, or the worst case scenario is we sort of start co-opting these other players into the system that we're used to. So I don't know, the CCCU, they say, let's invest $500 million and we'll build this ecosystem and everybody else can join us. But then the reality is, I don't know, will they? And does it make sense? And so that's sort of my big question for you, Andrew, is just help me think through some of the breakthroughs that we can make in terms of partnerships and collaboration.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is, timeline, because most schools have to live within the, you got to keep yourself sustainable in the 0 to 5 years. So you have to look at what are things that might contribute to this that are really going to help where you're going. And, I think that Matthew is, he's in, I don't want to steal your thunder, but, he's come up with some things that I think are in the same space of, how do you essentially disrupt Christian high school education and use that as a way to attract more students. And I think that in doing that, you're contributing. Open Biola is an example of doing that. So some of it is you're going to feed the ecosystem, right? Then the other is you're going to, I think to a certain extent, you have to do some trials that are going to be within new frameworks. It has to be, the interface. It's easy for me to take this credit, to take 90 credits into a final year that's going to cost $3,500 because we don't have all the cost structures that a lot of schools do. But, if another school was going to do that, it would have to be through a trial. And it would be, if with ORU, one could just be, how do you streamline your own Bible Institute? And then that process, and how do you potentially extend that and use this as a network of like-minded, because Bible Institutes are kind of the, it's under the water. But there's probably other like-minded Bible Institutes that you might be able to tap into that, I know the ORU is kind of spirit-filled Christian education. Well, there's going to be a spirit-filled domain that's underwater here. And, how would that map? So for each of you, it's going to be different is some of my thoughts. But yeah, but I'd love to hear from, Matthew, and also from other people on, where you'd like to see this group go. And if the list of potential, as I see it, a working group, really we need to have a working group is someone who's going to do the work. Basically. So I'm offering this GC4 as the first working group because I'm saying I'll do the work, and I'm inviting other people in. And in many ways, it may be new members. Like if you look at the partners I listed, YWAM's not a part of this conversation. I talked to them earlier in this week, but they, that may be a different. Some of the working groups might bring in other groups, but if you do a working group around early high school, I think you're gonna bring in specialists on that. You're gonna say who's the best at early high school in Christian higher education, and how do we do that? And same thing with analytics and helping serve non-traditional students with analytics, and those type of things. So
yeah, and Andrew, thank you as well. I know, Mike, we're getting close to the top of the hour here, so we may need to reschedule a continued discussion, because I think what we're seeing is probably the thought patterns that we all have gone through. And I'll post to the Google group. I don't know that I did earlier this week, but there's been some great discussions in the broader educational community about what Microsoft buying LinkedIn means. And some of the discussion is really related to what is higher education. And I think what we're piggybacking off of, and Mike, I really appreciate you showing this slide, because this is exactly the struggle. We're thinking above water in this graph, and the higher education global, stuff, people and resources are now really thinking broader than just, coming to a university, coming to a place and time, coming to a Bible college, coming to a seminary. All this underwater stuff is now, you could move that line down, and it's becoming to the point where what does it really mean to get an education? So definitely something that I think the GC4 subgroup of this would need to come to conclusions on, or answers to.
And on that note, I apologize to James and to Judy, who might be wanting to add some additional comments and questions. But to honor everybody's time, I want to sort of formally end it. And if you have more time, I guess you can continue. I believe this channel will remain. I have to go, but I think this channel can can continue for those who want to continue for the next couple of minutes. But I want to first of all just thank you, Andrew, for your time again, for sharing your vision with all of us. This recording we'll post this. Are you okay posting this publicly?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Okay. No objections there. And then we'll share that URL to those who registered, and then you can forward that. And we'll also definitely put it in our CHEIA group. And again, if you're interested in continuing this conversation, we encourage you to go there and put your comments and your thoughts, because that is really where the action is at. This is really just a dessert, it's a icing on the top, for us to be able to actually meet in real time. So thank you again for joining us. And Matthew, once you have that file, maybe if you can sort of either forward to me raw file, or you can upload and send me the link, and I'll forward that to the rest of the group. So thank you.
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna just post a couple things. If people want to stay on and continue the conversation, I'm glad to do that. Other people can drop off too, but I'd be glad to finish other people's questions. And I just sent the link to my MOOC if you guys want to go through that. I covered a lot of this stuff in more detail. Olgi, I see you're asking about sharing articles. I don't remember if I track my stuff on Zotero, so I will send you my Zotero. Let me see if I can find the right path. I'll share you my Zotero bibliography, and as I get things, I generally add them to Zotero, and I think you should be able to access that. But yeah, other people can go ahead and drop off if you want. But if so, Judy or James, do you guys want to stay on and I could keep the conversation, or do you need to move on?
I'm good. I have an 11 o'clock, but I guess, is Matthew still on? Or did he drop off?
No, I'm here.
And this kind of goes back to some of the things when I was looking through Andrew's presentation, was this whole connection between secondary education and its connection to higher education. And how does that play in with, as far as, there's so many things going on in my mind, but how those two things connect? Because I look at my son who went to high school in Arizona and was able to, and this might be a 0 to 5 non-disruptor, that basic disruptor that Andrew talks about. But U of A goes into the high school and provides a engineering class that gets them credits. Are any CHE institutes doing that with Christian high schools, just to provide that opportunity for them to start on that pathway to education? How does that work? That's one of the pieces that I kind of look at. And then how does what do years mean? Is 4 years really a meaningful time in high school, and is 4 years needed in high school, or is 3 years needed and then there's a gap year in which they can do something? So those are all things that I think of, because I come from a total, all of education needs to be looked at, and I know we're just talking about higher education. So those are just some of the things that are going through my mind listening to Andrew's piece, and then just hearing that you're doing some stuff with the secondary high school area.
Yeah, Jim, great. We think alike. I think all of our minds go crazy when we get together. But one of the things that I've had the privilege of doing is I've had a son in what's called the Teal Fellowship, and I don't think it's still around, but most of you may know that Peter Thiel did a challenge to young people to say, I'll give you $50,000 a year if you stay out of college and be mentored by me. And so it's an interesting take on, what does it mean? Where does it mean? Where do you get educated? Where does training happen? Where does all that happen in life? From a strict, thinking pattern, sort of the above water in that analogy, thinking our dual credit has just exploded. I think we had 300 and some in just our local high schools last year, and I think we're poised to be 400 or 500 this year. So we have reached down. We used to be at 11th grade. You had to be an 11th grade or higher to take dual credit. We reached down to 9th grade. We've done the early college work, specifically with our aviation school or college, and what that is you can actually start in 9th grade and say that you want to be an aviator, and we will partner with you to help you reduce the cost of your education. Because the very interesting thing is, coming in at 9th grade, at least here in Texas now, actually going from 8th grade to 9th grade, you have to declare what you think you want to be, which is really controversial, but Texas has adopted. So if you want to be an aviator at 9th grade, you decide that, and then we picked up on that, and then we will provide for you as many classes as we can. And the nice thing about it is, guess who's paying the bill on those classes? We're getting income on that, but it's coming from the state. So it's very interesting, of course, being in Texas, and of course, compared with California, where the split between church and state is happening. The merger of church and state is I think somewhat important to our governor on down. But it's a different, it's a very interesting thing moving forward, because we found and continue to find that there's some success. We've talked about the idea of actually formulating and what's called an early college. That early college is in our aviation side of the house right now. That's what we call it, and that's what the local ISD calls it. So yes, we continue to look towards success there.
Okay.
Matthew, I'm actually thinking maybe this is the next webinar, man, that you could share what you're doing. And two groups that I've looked at that I've been kind of impressed with is, have you seen Bluefield College? Their dual enrollment?
No.
Okay. Part of what's interesting to me is it's dirt cheap, $135 per course. And then another one is Houston Baptist University. They have one called the Academy that I've looked at. But part of what I think we could do, Matthew, is maybe you could be point. And do you know of other kind of, those are the two pioneers I know in this space. But do you know of any other groups that are kind of pioneers in dual enrollment for from Christian higher education to schools?
Yeah, not from a Christian higher education perspective. We actually, what we've done is come out of sort of some of the non-Christian higher education ideas.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's another thing. And I think that's part of what this group's trying to do is, sadly, I think often some of the best innovations are happening in the secular sector, and we got to translate them to the Christian sector. So, and I know, Matthew, you've been in a lot of those groups. So, and I think that's part of what we can do is, what are the best models, whether Christian or secular, on dual enrollment, and how do we translate those and diffuse the innovation among Christian higher education? Right. So.
Well, and I'm curious, is anybody that's left on the call, are you all doing, like Jay or Ogie, are you doing dual credit at ORU?
Yes, we do an Advantage program, but it's small. It might be 200, or no, excuse me, about 100 at best a semester. We do it 14 weeks long, high school, early enrollment, dual, whatever. We haven't ramped it up regionally, right? It's just been local, so to speak, right?
But do you do that at the university, or you do that at the high school?
Well, we do it mainly online right now.
Online.
We do. I understand, Matthew, you do it in the high schools often. We may have experimented with on campus, local high schools. I know we do have dedicated sections from high schools. I'm sure we've done some face-to-face, but most of that's been online in 10, 20 credits at the most, whatever people earn.
Yeah, we have all three online here on our campus. Here in Longview, we actually have it on our campus in McKinney, which is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
And then we do it. We actually go into the actual ISD, is what they're called here in Texas, the Independent School District, and do it in their classrooms on their sites.
Okay. Another question I had, since unless we're going to continue, different direction, but on the underwater or underwater type focus as far as accreditation, is that kind of what Angie, you're talking about with the G4 becoming an accreditor for those pieces, or how do we kind of figure out which pieces, and would we all agree to it? I guess that's the other part,
Right. Let me give an answer to that. So we wouldn't really be an accreditor. We would fall, what we're proposing to do is to fall under Ofqual's accreditation. So that's a UK system of accreditation of vocational frameworks. We're going to work through a partner, Qualify. But what we will do is we will essentially work with these groups to get them to meet those standards. A lot of these groups are pretty close already, and you have to just make some minor modifications to be able to meet their standards. So, so that's essentially what the GC4 would be doing. Now, whether you accept it, that's each school. That's up to each school, right?
Yeah.
But what it does is it eases things, because to an accreditor, it's just an international institution. And whether you accept international credit, you know, really isn't going to raise a whole lot of red flags for people as long as it fits. I mean, what DEAC said is all they care is it you know, we have our degree map and it has to fit our degree map, you know, and as long as it's, you know, all the boxes are checked in the degree plan, then they're fine with it. But I think at that point it becomes both a business and academic decision. The business decision is, you know, a lot of schools, you know, do you view it as that's a way to lose money because you're charging, you're not getting money from that. What we've found is with intelligent marketing, you know, you just don't target the same customers. You know, it's like I get my phone, I'm on AT&T's network, I'm paying half price. I'm unusual. Most people pay AT&T full price, right? So, but maybe 5% are going to find a way around it and pay the half price rate, but it opens up a new market for them. But then I think that, you know, the other question is on academic standards of, you know, part of what I found is on this unbundled competency-based stuff, it's easier. There's certain types of things it's good at measuring and other things it's not good at measuring. So, you know, I've told Matthew, if I were to translate people to his engineering program, you probably couldn't just take the average student from us. But I could probably pick the top students and they would actually transfer well to you. But the average student for a really high-end engineering program may not work. So that's going to depend, because you can't just let anyone be out there building bridges or, you know, your bridge is going to fall down, right?
Yeah. So. Okay. I have to run. I have hundreds of others, but I have Mike here that I can bounce questions off of and everything like that.
Yeah, and feel free to send emails to the list. If you guys aren't on the list, Michael, Matthew, or Jay can send you the link.
Yeah, and I'm on there, and I was the one that emailed you about your slide.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, yeah, thanks. Sending me the correction. Hey, man, I like it whenever people find typos. I've heard people say that's how they do proofreading. They publish it openly, and then they get their corrections because
that happens to me. Like, hey, did you know this? Oh, thank you. I meant
right. One of my slides added up to 110%, but at least I consistently had each one add to 110%.
Exactly. So, but hey, thanks for everything, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to add anything or has questions?
Well, my questions had more to do with, you talked about us having our one option would be to build your own ecosystem where you can move people from being part of maybe a MOOC or a specialized area into getting degrees at that college. And my thoughts had more to do with really exploring how to best do that, how to also manage and support the student body that's online so that we can have that constant movement and also retention too. So
yeah, well, I think that this group, the University Innovation Alliance, have you been to their website yet?
Yes, I have.
Okay, yeah, they have the best stuff on that. Now, what I'm trying to do is to reverse engineer what they've done, because, and I think that there's two parts of what they're doing. Well, probably three parts. One is the analytics. The other is the thing they call intensive advising, where, you know, if you listen to who gave this presentation? I heard a presentation recently where, you know, I think it's Arizona State. They have 500 triggers that will get an academic advisor to call the student within 24 hours.
Interesting.
And, you know, anything, I mean, it sounds a little big brotherish, but it actually works. It's dramatically improved their, you know, if anything's going wrong with that student, then they get very effective advising, and it works brilliantly.
Wow.
And they've dramatically boosted their retention because, you know, they have all these signals that, you know, they can tell whenever a student's having problems, and they catch it, and they get, you know, the intensive advising happening before the student gets too far. And then, you know, the third area is the adaptive learning. I've been looking more on the adaptive learning because we don't have the money to do the intensive advising right now. But, you know, the bigger schools, I think, probably have a bigger bang for their buck on the intensive advising because, you know, I think there's a lot more you can do in terms of retention for that. So I can't remember. There's a name of a few vendors that do that. It's, you know.
And what was the term that you used for that?
Intensive advising and learning analytics. Let me see if I can find the name of the learning analytics company. I mean, you can just start doing.
It's also called engagement analytics.
Yeah, engagement analytics. That's a good one.
Got it.
Let me see if I can find if there's an image of a company. Yeah, I can't find the name of the company right now, but I could probably email it to you later. I watched one of this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's, you know, tons of information out there. I was just wondering about your thoughts on where some of the best information is.
Civitas, Civitas is one.
Oh, okay.
Are you familiar with them?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I mean, it's a fairly significant investment, but I think they're one of the main go-to people for that type of thing. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. So we'll, I guess, hopefully see some of you on the next webinar. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew.
Bye.
Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.